Welcome to Books, Dreams, and Financial Things, where we talk about marriage, blending our family, finances, and our dreams. We hope while sharing our journey, you can relate and learn with us and from us. Welcome back.
Hey, how you guys doing? Welcome back. Second episode. I'm excited.
Yep. Second episode of season 2. Is that what we're calling this? Season 2?
Season
Yes.
2, second episode. We did like 42 episodes of season 1. So.
Right. This is season 2.
Right. So, yeah, let's go into it.
All right. Well, today we're going to be talking about co-parenting with absent parent and consistent parent. I do want to start with a disclaimer. A lot of times people say there's like 3 sides to the story, right? Hers, his, and the truth or whatever. And I understand that, but to me, it's more about different perspectives. Because unless you are just like a blatant liar, you're trying to tell the truth as you know it, right? So in this episode or any episode where we're talking about a third party, we're always sharing our perspective. If that person isn't here, they are always welcome to come and share their perspective. We invite you here to our podcast to share your perspective of the situation. So with that being said, I thought of this topic just because we've been dealing with our oldest son's father, and he just turned 13, and so we've been dealing just with, or I've been dealing mostly for the last since he was 9 months old, with him just kind of being in and out, and then once we've been married. You've been dealing with him a little bit as well.
Right.
And so we just wanted to kind of talk about that side. Not so much being a single mom, this isn't what this is for, just like how it is, how we've navigated trying to co-parent with someone who just isn't consistent, honestly. I don't know what other word to use besides that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to, was just being inconsistent. And there are a lot of people out there who probably have seen a situation or been through a situation like this. I think this is a great topic to talk about in general, just because, somebody out there might be dealing with the same situation. And when do you, make your move or whatever it is that you do concerning the situation? Because not only is this something that's dealing with us as parents, but the kid as well.
Right. And I've tried to do my best in dealing with the situation. I've tried to stay open-minded. I've tried to stay, just not be bitter, even when I was just feeling upset or angry or frustrated with this individual. I've tried to be open-minded and be like, you know what? If you're consistent, if you come around and you're serious and you have open access to your child, but I've kind of gotten to a point where I'm, pretty much kind of done with that, I think, at this time, just because of all the inconsistencies. And so we'll just get into a little bit of a background. Like I said, I became a single mom pretty much when, we've already said his name, but I don't know if I want to say his name on this one, but since my son was 9 months old, his father and I didn't work out. The reason is a whole different scenario. It's a whole different topic and episode. But but I was always open-minded. I would always take our son to him and say, hey, do you want to see him this weekend? Hey, we can meet you at the park. Hey, we could do this. It was always kind of me pushing it. And so I said once he turns 3, because, with my just learning what I know about kids, his memory is pretty intact at 3. I said, once he hits 3, it's going to be on you to decide whether you're going to be involved or not. I'm not going to push it anymore. I'm not going to be the one to facilitate that. And then 3 hit, and then I didn't hear from him for, I think, 7 years.
Right.
And at that point, you were in the picture. And then every once in a while, he would reach out, like around his birthday, and it would be like, oh, you and I should meet to talk about this. And I'm like, well, what about seeing him? And it would never be really about that. So I just kind of left it alone. But then I think it was more you who kind of pushed, like, oh, let him, let's see where he's coming from. And so you want to explain when we met with him?
Yeah, but let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
Because one of the things that males, we do as a whole, I have friends and so forth, and there's things out there. But a lot of times what ends up happening is it boils down to 2 things. Mainly the kid stays with the mom. Typically it's the mother nature. You guys keep the kids. But sometimes, and there are dads out there who it's like either we're all together in a relationship or we're not. I don't know if you felt like that in that scenario. I remember when we talked about it briefly a little bit, it seemed like that. And, coming from where I came from and, dealing with the people that I've dealt with, I've known guys in general to be like, okay, hey, I'll be in my kid's life as long as there's not another man in their life and as long as possibly there's a relationship between me and the mom. Did you feel that way?
I don't know if it was like, oh, it's going to be like we're a family or nothing, but it just seemed as if he would want to hang out with me more. It wasn't even like, oh, we're going to be a family. It wasn't like, oh, let's all come together.
Right.
It was just like, you and I, let's hang out. So it was more like that. So I don't know the motive there. I don't want to speak for him in that area because I don't know what the motive was, but that's just what he would literally say, like, can you and I meet to talk about the situation? And I'm like, he's little. Let's just bring, he could just come, like, what we got to talk about, Okay. So it was more like that. So I don't know what that was. I'm not a man, but.
Okay. So, so psychologically.
It was weird, but, it was what it was. But
Okay.
It just, So then fast forward to when we were open to giving him an opportunity to have a relationship with our son.
Okay, so ultimately, not having my father in my life, for the most part, I was raised by my grandmother. And in my neighborhood, I think I've said this in some episode before, like my top maybe 6 close friends in my neighborhood, all of us was raised by our grandmother, so we didn't have our fathers. And one of the things that you think of as time progresses is a lot of times, especially with boys with single moms, if the father's absent and the mom doesn't really necessarily talk about the dad, then as a kid, we come up with our own idea of who our dad is, why he didn't work out in the relationship or whatever the circumstance is. And this type of stuff happens at maybe when you get into kindergarten and you have Father's Day. Then that's a thought process that comes up. And then it's like, okay, well, my dad's not here. Or you see somebody else and you see the dynamic of the family and it's mom, dad, and kid or kids. And then you notice in your situation, that's not the situation. And so then as a kid, you start to think like, okay, typically we blame the mom. We think something's going on with mom and she's not allowing us to see our dad. And so with our son, I didn't want that type of situation. So, when he reached out, like you said, he's done in the past and so forth, his father, I was like, you know what? Let's give him a shot. Who knows? It's been a couple years. Maybe things have changed with him and maybe, he'll want to be in his son's life. Right. And as a kid, me being the stepfather, I wanted our son to know that, hey, we've done everything we can, if in fact he chooses not to be in his life, to give him the opportunity to be in his son's life. And so when he reached out, everything sounded great. We met up with him and, it was like a no-brainer to me. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, let's introduce him back into his life.
He tends to say, all the right things. So it sounded very promising. And it did sound slightly different than previous times. And like you said, I didn't want it to ever be on me. I think that's, you always say, because I've had the same phone number since I was 16, and you would always try to say, change it. And yeah, part of me was like, I want to make sure I'm open when he comes, or, so it's never on me that my son doesn't have a relationship with him. I didn't want to be like, I never put him on child support. I wasn't like, oh, you want to see your son? Take me to court. Never. It was just like, all you have to do is just be consistent. And to me, consistent is different. I wasn't like, be consistent and give me any money, because I hadn't asked for any money for at that point 10 years. So it was just being involved consistently, checking on him consistently, talking to him on the phone consistently, seeing him consistently. These are things that I was hoping for. And so when he reached out, he seemed like he was in a stable situation, and you were like, sure, let's do it. And it didn't work out that time. Right. See, it didn't work out that time, but yet we were still open.
Right. See, the reality is, when you're dealing with a kid, and this is what I learned obviously with Keone, and you taught me this, is, you don't want, the father to come into the situation and then disappear for a long time, then come into the situation and disappear. Now, my situation was sort of kind of like that. My daddy would go to, he would go to jail. When he get out of jail, because my grandmother was his mom, he would come stay there for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then, eventually end up back in jail. So in my head, I was just like, okay, well, it's not going to probably hurt him. But
it's actually very damaging.
Very, okay.
For a child.
Yeah. So I didn't even think of that.
I feel like more damaging than just being completely absent.
Right.
Because you get your hopes up and you're like all excited. Our son at the time didn't even know how he looked.
Right.
Which was, in some ways, I kind of felt bad because I think for me, I thought it was better to just kind of keep it all the way away. Like, so I would show him baby pictures, but
Right.
I wouldn't show him the pictures where his dad was in them. Looking back, I thought that was best, but maybe that wasn't best. But then I felt like I would have to explain to him where he was or why it didn't work out. And I felt like he was too young for that conversation because of how things did end, which he has seen pictures now, obviously. And so, but yeah, that's what I did because I thought that was the right thing to do. So he had seen pictures, but it just wasn't a vivid, image in his head. So when he did see him, he didn't know who he was. And so then it was very emotional. We did let them meet. It seemed emotional on both ends. And I was like, here we go. His dad has other kids. He told those kids, he told our son about those kids, and our son was very excited. Even to this day, though, he counts those kids as his siblings.
Right.
So he's still very open to that. And I'm sure he's open to having a relationship with his dad as well. But so I thought it was all good. So then we just asked. We felt like to be consistent, to show us consistency, the only way that made sense at that time was to have some type of financial consistency.
Right. So understand something, because initially she said she wasn't asking for child support or anything along those lines. And that was the situation. So after he met him that time, one of the things she sort of kind of left out is we didn't hear from him for maybe almost 2 years or something along those lines.
Oh, right.
So once that happened, another thing she didn't mention is the effect that it had on our son at that time span. So once that happened and he seen him, and it was like right before his birthday, and I think he was supposed to come to the birthday party.
Didn't come.
He didn't come.
I had to continue to call. Like, can you at least just call him and wish him a happy birthday?
And so the devastating thing that happened to our son is then all of a sudden you notice a little change in his behavior and the way that he did stuff and so forth. And you obviously going to school for child development and understanding a lot of those things, and me not understanding it at the time, I noticed those effects. So then we fast forward to the money aspect. So we didn't hear from him for some time.
2 years, right.
2 years. And so instead of introducing him again to our son, which is what he wanted to do again and see him again, we had to figure out a way, because not that we needed it, but we had to figure out a way where we can see if he can be consistent before bringing back Keone. And the only way we can test it was by the financial aspect.
Right. I mean, because, like he said, it did have such an effect on our son. He had to go to counseling, and even that counselor suggested that's even, I think that's the main where we got that idea of like, okay, well, see if he's able to be consistent with just some type of child support.
Right.
And we did leave it up to him. We had no amount.
Nope.
It could have been any amount. I'm not even joking. Like, it could have been $20.
Right.
But we just needed to see a consistent effort.
Right.
So we gave it, we allowed him to choose the amount. He chose his amount. And we said for 3 months, we would like to see that. And then we'll go from there.
Right.
And
ideally, after he would have paid the 3 months, we would have let him back in his life. But we didn't want to say that because we didn't want the motive to be, okay, I pay this and then I can come back and I could see him and then he disappears.
Right.
But that was
it was going to be a slower process, though, for
Right.
sure. It was going to be like, okay, consistently you paid, now consistently talk to him on the phone. It wasn't going to just be like, okay, here he is again, because it was very difficult on our son. And I was like, as his mother, I feel like that's my number one job, is to protect him. And so I wasn't open to that at all.
Right.
So,
and another thing that I did leave out, and one of the things we want to do is be transparent across the board, in case obviously he said it, but we had a conversation in between before this next time, And I flipped out. I was just so upset. We argued over the phone with regards to the circumstance and the situation. It was more so me, just feeling. Of course, I was taking a little bit of how I felt as a kid, not having my father, and then put myself in our son's shoes as well. And so then you have both of those and became way more emotional. And it most likely didn't help the situation, but that was part of it as well. But nevertheless, we went from there. So as far as the consistency goes and the money, I think I'm not sure exactly how.
I believe it was like 2 months out of
he paid,
3.
Right. He paid 2 months and then
didn't, and then contacted us again 6 months later.
Right.
And we had a similar situation. We're like, this is it. He was very offended or irritated by the word consistency.
Right.
But that was just what was important to us.
Right.
That was the main thing. That was the only thing that I cared about.
Right.
Because I'm a little bit more, I understand, it was emotion because they're, 2 egos and all that. I'm a little bit more removed from that because it's been so long. It's just
Right.
like, this is it. This is just all I'm asking. And it's not even a point where like, oh, is it okay? It's like, this is what is required at this point. And I feel like when you're the parent who has been, raising the child, whether you have a significant other or not, I've been raising him by myself,
Right.
for all these years. So I feel like it is my duty, my right to say what not that I would be that petty, but if it's like, you need to jump on one foot. I feel like
Right.
if you care about your child,
Right.
then you're going to do whatever it takes. And I feel like I wasn't even asking anything outlandish. It was just like, be consistent because he's about to be a teenager, which now he is. And that's going to be important. These are crucial years. And we want to make sure that you are serious. And, if not only consistency, but another thing that I was asking for was communication.
Right.
So if something, because life happens and we get that, and I don't know his mental state,
Right.
And all that. So if something happens where you feel like you're not able to do what you say, then just reach out and communicate that.
Yeah, see, ultimately, that was the reality of it. I mean, one of the things about you, I've seen a lot of other kids' moms out there who have zero tolerance. She's got way more patience than any woman I've ever known. But that's the reality. One of the things we would say is if a month came up and he couldn't pay, it wasn't about the money. It was like, okay, well, if he called us and said, hey, this is my situation, I can't really pay, or whatever the circumstance. He could have said he lost his job and he couldn't afford to pay anymore. But if he would have communicated, that would have made the huge difference with regards to the kids, because that's just what it is. And so that second time, obviously, when he tried to come in, our son didn't know. So there was no damaging situation
Right.
like before.
The second or the third time he didn't know about.
He didn't know about. But
I did ask our son, I said, just hypothetically speaking, if your dad comes back in the picture, like, do you feel, because that's another thing the counselor was saying.
Right.
She said that he needs to be included in these decisions because
Right.
it does affect his life as well. And
Right.
I know for us, it's like we're, how we were raised, it's like, what? Like,
Right.
kids don't decide these things
Right.
at all. But I understood, that it was important for him to feel like that was part of his decision. So I asked him, I said, if your dad comes around again, do you feel like he should just be able to just come right back? Or do you think that we should, see if he's being consistent with, phone calls and child support? And he was old enough to understand that. And he was like, he needs to be consistent.
Right.
He needs to, I want to know that he's serious. And this is what I think at that time, 11, 12-year-old, maybe
Right.
12 was saying.
Right.
And so I'm like, if he can get it, it's frustrating that an adult can't.
Right.
And who knows, maybe he does understand. You never know. Like I said, I'm just sharing my perspective. I don't know the reasoning why there would be all these chains, lines of communication that would just be broken time and time again. I don't know.
Right.
I'm just sharing how frustrating it has been for me, and I'm sharing how frustrating it has been for my son to see these things. Because now, he knows about his other siblings, and I don't know what he thinks about it. But I know as me and as an adult, it doesn't make sense to me as a grown-up, like why somebody's able to do here but not do here. But then you don't know really that situation. So it's all kind of a messed up situation, and it's very frustrating because I was so open. I don't feel as open anymore. I feel like, Keone's 13. It's been 13 years. Like, what's another 5 years? I I don't know. I mean, I don't know until I guess the situation presents itself. But right now, today, I'm not entertaining.
Okay. and I get it. So currently, what I want to do is sort of kind of get to where we're at now. So the idea of if his dad comes now and wants to be in his life now at 13, what are you going to do? What would be obviously me and you would talk about it.
Right.
But for those people who have a situation that may be similar to this, first of all, to close this situation, where are we at now?
Well, I am at, I've done my best.
Right.
And if he's interested, then we're going to probably have to go through the court system.
Okay.
That way it's just more on paper and just more set. Then it's up, it's up to you if you don't follow the court. I don't know, but I'm personally done. It's very draining because, like I said, I don't want to put it on our son, so I just kind of take it all, and it's a lot for me. But I would take it if that would be best for our son. I just feel like now it's not good for our son anymore for all these yo-yo in and out.
Right.
And I'm just like, this is what he doesn't even know about it. Imagine if he knew. That's just devastating.
Okay. And so when you look over the whole diaspora of what has transpired since he was born until now, if you can do something different, what would you have done that would have been different during this time span?
Honestly, I would have probably gotten the courts involved right away. Mm-hmm. That way they could have just told us, here's the visitation, here's the child support, here's what it is.
Right.
That way it's not a guessing game. You don't have to call me every 2 years, every 10 years, every nothing. And it wouldn't have cost, if you do it right away when the relationship ends, and it doesn't cost as much. You don't have to worry about getting all these lawyers and stuff. You guys just figure it out, and that would have been it. Right.
Very true. Okay, and so then with a single parent or a parent who's married, remarried, and has a step, and you have that son that has a different father, or if it's a girl, what would you? Yeah. So ultimately, you're saying to go through the courts right off the bat.
Right, and also I would say to try to keep your emotions, out of it, because the thing that happens too when a relationship ends, you are dealing with that. You're dealing with those feelings of that and those emotions, especially the way ours ended. It was not a lot of closure. So you have to figure out that part, that piece. And I think that's why I was open for so long, and I was taking the baby to him. And I was, because, you were still holding on to the relationship. But once that is over, you got to just, even when it ends, you have to try to keep your feelings out of it. And that's what I've tried to do, because I've been very upset. And it would be easy for me to curse him out and say, you're never going to see your son.
Right.
Take me to court.
The
and
typical reaction.
I've never done it, because I was always like, I'm going to take myself out of this and do what I believe is best for my child. And I know my child wants a relationship. I'm sure he does now today after all of this has transpired. Even though I did have this weird dream. That's off topic that maybe he wouldn't. I don't know what happened. Oh. Yeah. So I think that, you just have to try to always put yourself in your child's shoes and do what's best for them, regardless of how you're feeling towards that individual.
That's some sound advice, I think, with regards to it. Take emotions out and do what's best for the kid, because ultimately, if you're doing what's best for the kid, then, at the end of the day, the kid, one of the things we talked about is by allowing him to do whatever the circumstance is, eventually, regardless of what happens, the kid is going to get a perception of what that parent, the absent parent is. And then when they get older, because eventually when I got probably about 16, 17 years old, I understood, okay, my dad just didn't want to be in my life. He chose the streets over me. And similar situation with my mom. She chose that. So we come to that conclusion. So I know a lot of times there are kids out there that may get upset or may get mad at the parent who's actually in the kid's life, but be patient. Don't get emotional about it. And eventually that kid will understand, the scenario and what's happening in the situation.
And also, you don't need to badmouth that parent, because our son barely knows how I really feel. I mean, not barely. You said you're barely, so I said
Right.
barely. Our son has no idea how like I
No
really
idea.
feel, because if I really told y'all how I feel, it would be a whole different thing. But I don't try to project that onto him. I have never said your dad ain't this, your dad, because I feel like at the end of the day, like he said, our son will be an adult. It might be once he's a father himself. At some point in his life, he will see what it is. And if he asks me, I think that he's almost at that age where if he were to ask me, I would be able to tell him the truth as to like why we didn't work. Because you're going to have that conversation as well. Like, well, what happened with, you and my dad? And of course, I would always be like, it just didn't work out. But then there's going to become a point where I'm going to tell him the truth.
Right.
And he's going to take that information and do whatever. And then if he ever does have a relationship with his dad or not, he'll make that decision for himself. And it may be, and that's the thing. If you feel some type of way that might not be positive towards your child's mother or father, but that child decides to still have a relationship, then so be it.
Right.
Like, you can't feel no
Gotta
type
let
of
that
way.
go.
Because I've even dealt that. I'm like, imagine if after all this, he were to go and just have this great relationship. Like, his dad was there, and I've been, so what? Like, okay, then that's
Right.
just what it is. Like, you
Right.
have to just take your emotions, like I said, out of it. Because that might happen. And yeah, I've had to raise him and deal with these crazy teenage years, and he's not had to do anything, but maybe they might have the best relationship when Keone becomes an adult.
Right.
And that's just going to be what it is.
So, in closing, keep emotions out of it. Keep an open line. I got to respect that about you with regards to it. Keep an open line. And then eventually you're going to have to make a decision based and predicated on the actions and what has transpired from the absent parent. And then understand that no matter what, that parent, unless they're deceased or no longer here on this earth, are going to always be there. And so there's a possibility that later in life they can get in a relationship or whatever the circumstance is with regards to that.
Right. And always, always do what's best for your child.
Always do best for your child. Also, you guys, make sure you stay tuned for next week as we talk about friends.
And how those friendships change over time.
So stay tuned for next week. Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining and listening. I know that this was a little bit of a roller coaster, but hey, it is what it is. This is part of our life. This is what we want to talk about with regards to the podcast and everything that's going on. We want to keep it real. We want to keep it authentic, as much obviously understanding it's from our perspective. And, that's that. So thank you guys for listening. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Bye-bye.